Hello, listeners! Welcome to Stars of the Golden Age, a show that highlights the lives of legends from film, music, and the birth of television during Hollywood's Golden Age and the few years surrounding it. I am your host, Erin Carlson. Today, we will be discussing Humphrey Bogart, Hollywood's tough guy and film noir leading man. Humphrey DeForest Bogart was a Christmas baby, born on December 25th, 1899, barely making it into the world before the turn of the century. His parents were Belmont Bogart and Maud Humphrey, and the well-to-do family resided in the Upper West Side of New York City. Both of Humphrey's parents were professionals, both highly devoted to their work, so Humphrey's childhood was much different than other children of the time. Belmont Bogart was a cardiopulmonary surgeon, which, side note, heart surgery or any surgery really in the late 1800s does not sound fun. And Maud was a highly successful commercial illustrator and art director for a women's fashion magazine. One of her drawings of baby Humphrey went on to be widely circulated as part of an ad campaign for a popular baby food brand. So, Humphrey Bogart was a star before he could even walk. But a hiatus would follow until adulthood. Belmont Bogart came from considerable money, and both he and Maud made really good salaries and did well on investments. I read that Maud actually made more as an artist and art director than Belmont did as a surgeon. He made about $20,000 per year as a surgeon. This was about 1907 to 1910 in that era. And that would be about $668,000 today. So pretty good. Sounds legit. Maud allegedly made $50,000 per year, which, this is really hard to believe, would be $1.7 million today. So she was a very successful woman, but not an awesome mother. The couple would go on to have two more children, both girls. Humphrey recalled later in life that his childhood was formal and cold, and that love and affection were simply not displayed in their home. In fact, his mother was so cold and formal that she insisted her children call her by her first name instead of mom or mother. Humphrey and his sisters were not held much as babies, probably only when they really had to be, and they were not nurtured as children. And this kind of absence of love can have really serious long-term effects on people. The family employed a staff of 2 maids, a laundress, and a cook. Ooh, I would take a laundress. That sounds kind of nice. I didn't read so, but I assume there was a nanny as well. I hope so, at least. Both of Humphrey's parents had offices in their large 3-story brownstone where they would be frequently unapproachable, and Belmont also saw patients in his home office as well, so there was people parading through all the time. Their home was grand and large and beautifully decorated, but it was a home absent of love and tender memories. Humphrey's parents were as opposite as can be from the sounds of it. His father was kind and funny and more laid back, while Maud was cold and serious and stern. Work and excelling professionally were her number one priority. Kids will raise and love themselves, right? That's what she was hoping for. Maud would dress little Humphrey in ridiculous little boy Fauntleroy outfits that he hated, I might add. Who wouldn't? He was teased terribly at school for his appearance. I mean, just picture it. Let me explain this to you. A velvet jacket covering a blouse with a big ruffled collar and little knee pants. Oh, that poor kid. It wasn't just the clothes, though. That baby food ad was haunting him into childhood. And his interesting name that other kids thought was silly. Humphrey hated that his parents named him Humphrey. As time went on, hostilities grew in the Bogart household. When Humphrey was a young teen, he sadly discovered that both of his parents were addicted to morphine and alcohol. Apparently, they both had some pain issues that they were trying to self-medicate and then became addicted to both. He reportedly even discovered them shooting up outside of the family's home one day. Humphrey would need to step up and be a protector of his younger sisters. Humphrey wasn't particularly good in school and he was very unhappy at home, but luckily he did have one place where he could find some true happiness. The family had a lake home in upstate New York, and that is the one place that brought peace and a sense of a wholesome childhood to Humphrey. There, with some of the other seasonal residents, he could participate in activities with other affluent youths like swimming, sailing, and chess. That does sound like rich kid stuff, doesn't it? Unfortunately, that peace and happiness was ripped away from him when his parents decided to sell the lake home in 1916 when Humphrey was 16 years old. I'm assuming they could definitely afford it, so it's really sad that they sold it and took that away from him. Still struggling in school life, Humphrey's parents sent him to a strict boarding school in Massachusetts, but he was ultimately expelled from there. He decided at this point he was just done with school, and he joined the U.S. Navy in 1918, just a few months before the official end of World War I. He loved being able to see parts of the world during this time in the military, but he of course definitely saw some horrible results of the war as well. After his stint in the Navy, he became estranged from his parents, them pretty much telling him he wasn't welcome to stay in the family home. Humphrey Bogart was on his own in the great big world now. Humphrey blew through a series of low-paying jobs to support himself and his growing party lifestyle, but all of them would ultimately end in termination or him quitting. It seems like he was struggling to find his calling, his purpose in life during this time. He was soon about to come much closer to finding that purpose. Feeling down on his luck, hopeless, and needing money to live and that growing party lifestyle, he asked his friend's father for an entry-level position in his new production company. Humphrey quickly climbed the ranks to director's assistant. However, on the set of his first film in that role, he made a catastrophic mistake in a car crash scene, which resulted in 2 actors being injured. He was fired, of course, but eventually rehired, this time as a stage manager for theater productions. Behind the scenes in show business gave Humphrey Bogart the acting itch. In the next play he worked on, he was offered a small walk-on role with no lines just to see how he did on stage. It was also on this production tour that he met his first wife, actress Helen Menken, 10 years older than he was. It wasn't a fireworks type of love. In fact, Humphrey is quoted as saying, quote, "God, I don't want to marry that girl," end quote. How romantic. But she was well into show business, and he knew that marrying her would help his chances of getting more roles and building a career. So he did marry that girl in May of 1926. And with 100 guests stuffed in their little apartment, Helen had a nervous breakdown after the ceremony, followed by Humphrey telling people that he had just made a huge mistake. Sounds like a great wedding. So it may come as no surprise to learn that that marriage was over a little over a year after it began, after some nasty physical altercations during the time of the union. It was not a healthy marriage. The ink wasn't even dry on the divorce papers when Bogart began dating the woman who would become the second Mrs. Humphrey Bogart. Her name was Mary Phillips, a woman also in the industry that Humphrey had met a few years earlier. She was dating a friend of Humphrey's, but that didn't stop him from having an affair with Mary. Uh-oh, he's breaking the guy code. The affair went on until Mary's boyfriend, Humphrey's friend, proposed marriage to Mary. Mary told Humphrey about it and said she planned to marry him unless Humphrey had a better offer, the old ultimatum. So he proposed. She dumped her boyfriend, but not really because Mary insisted that she and Humphrey have an open marriage, so she got to have her cake and eat it too. They were married in April of 1928, less than 2 years after his first wedding. In fact, as part of this open marriage, Humphrey ended up spending a lot of time with his first wife. It seems they got along better divorced than married. Humphrey and Mary's marriage was not great either. He decided to create a little separation between them and try his luck in Hollywood while she worked in New York. He did secure some roles, but nothing was very successful. Humphrey also continued to perform on stage, but he was only getting minor roles. In 1934, he got the role that would end up fitting him perfectly. He played Duke Mantee, an escaped killer in the Petrified Forest, and as it turned out, this dark kind of role was his perfect fit. This, and his role in the film adaptation of the play 2 years later, would be his breakthrough roles. The next year, in 1937, he played a gangster in Dead End. And from there, he had a series of typecast tough guy films. Now, do you think a guy like Humphrey Bogart was satisfied with only 2 walks down the aisle? Of course not. While he was still married to Mary, Humphrey had a spicy fling with an actress he met in Hollywood named Mayo Metho. Now remember, Humphrey and Mary had an open marriage, but Mayo, who was also married, did not. She was married to a successful owner of a hot nightclub on the Sunset Strip who did not want to share his wife with other men. They both did eventually divorce their respective spouses, but Mary, wife number 2, had one last thing to say to Humphrey as they walked away from their marriage. Stay away from Mayo Metho. She will destroy you. Ooh, that's some intense advice. In August of 1938, Humphrey Bogart made that 3rd walk down the aisle to his blushing bride, Mayo Metho. He forgot to stay away from her, I guess. But even before the wedding, the couple was coined the name the Battling Bogarts. So what do you think? Will wife number 2 be able to say I told you so? Let's find out. The night of the wedding, Humphrey Bogart headed off to Tijuana for a fun little guys trip. That's typical wedding night tradition, right? Well, as you can imagine, Mayo was not pleased, but they eventually made up. That was their thing. Humphrey continued to work steadily on films, gaining more and more success in Hollywood. It didn't take long into marriage number 3 for him to fall in lust with another enticing actress, and soon he was having an affair. Mayo suspected he was being unfaithful, and as a result, she acted out in terrible ways. First, she started the house on fire. No big deal, right? And then she stabbed Humphrey with a knife. She clearly had some mental illness, and Humphrey actually did try to find help for her, but he couldn't quite get her the help that she needed. Maybe not having the affair would have been a good start, though, right? In 1942, it was time for the classic film we all know and love, Casablanca, one of my favorites. The movie was highly successful and ended up winning an Academy Award for Best Picture, and Bogart was also nominated for Best Actor. That was huge. This film coupled him with Ingrid Bergman, and the two had great on-screen chemistry together. Casablanca, of course, would go on to become one of the most beloved films of all time. However, both Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman thought the plot and dialogue were ridiculous during filming. Apparently, the world thought otherwise, though. Now, of course, World War II was well underway at this time, so Humphrey and Mayo toured with the USO to perform for the troops. The Battling Bogarts got a little rowdy one night and, with some guns gifted to them by the soldiers, began shooting up the ceiling in their hotel room. They were obviously completely wasted. They hadn't thought through the fact that randomly firing guns around a bunch of active duty soldiers in the middle of a deadly war was probably a bad idea. The soldiers thought they were under attack, and when they realized what was going on, they went ahead and took those guns back. Good idea. After the USO tour, Bogart's next film was To Have and to Have Not in 1944, and this is where he would meet Lauren Bacall, a beautiful actress more than half his age. He was 44 and she was 19. She was so young, in fact, that his wife Mayo wasn't threatened by them working together at all since she was so young. She was just a baby. Well, Lauren Bacall and Humphrey Bogart flirted quite a bit on set, and Lauren Bacall recalled that 3 weeks into filming, Bogart came to her trailer to say goodnight. She said, quote, "Suddenly he leaned over, put his hand under my chin, and kissed me. It was impulsive. He was a bit shy, no lunging wolf tactics. He took a worn package of matches out of his pocket and asked me to put my phone number on the back. I did. I don't know why I did, except it was just kind of part of our game. Bogey was meticulous about not being too personal, was known for never fooling around with women at work or anywhere else. He was not that kind of man, and he also was married to a woman who was a notorious drinker and fighter. A tough lady who would hit you with an ashtray, lamp, anything as soon as not, end quote. She apparently hadn't heard of his previous indiscretions. It was obvious that Mayo was too quick to dismiss the possibility of romance because Humphrey and Lauren began a passionate affair that they couldn't quite seem to get out of their systems. This, coupled with Mayo's addiction to alcohol and unpredictable behavior, would signal the end of marriage number 3 in early 1945 after 7 years of marriage. With his marriage to Mayo behind him, he was free to start fresh with Lauren Bacall. Never one to waste time before skipping down the aisle and saying I do, Humphrey Bogart married Lauren Bacall 11 days after his quickie divorce from Mayo. You know what they say, 4th time's a charm. Well, nobody actually says that, but it did hold true for Humphrey Bogart. Lauren Bacall said later in life that she did not find her future husband very appealing when she saw him in Casablanca. The friend that she saw the movie with thought that he was very sexy, but Lauren thought she was crazy for thinking so. Remember, these girls were teenagers at this time, so it was quite normal that she didn't find a man in his 40s attractive in a romantic way. To Have and to Have Not director Howard Hawks hated them dating. Lauren's mother hated her daughter dating a man so much older than her. But the heart wants what it wants, and not many people were successful at tearing apart the truest of true loves, which it sounds like this was. Bogart kept busy as a successful Hollywood actor for the next several years. He and his new wife would star in 3 more movies together: The Big Sleep in 1946, Dark Passage in 1947, and Key Largo in 1948. Their chemistry was always quite visible on the big screen. In 1949, he and Lauren Bacall welcomed baby boy Stephen into the world. Humphrey Bogart had finally found the happiness he'd looked for his entire life. He found the woman who was right for him and was a father at the age of 49. In 1952, Humphrey Bogart finally won an Academy Award for his role in the classic film The African Queen, co-starring Katharine Hepburn. That wasn't the only win of 1952. Bogart and Lauren Bacall also had another little boy, Leslie Howard Bogart, that same year. Happiness wouldn't last long, unfortunately. Just a couple of years later, Bogart was diagnosed with throat cancer. He was very, very sick when he filmed his final film, The Harder They Fall, in 1956. He barely made it through filming with the terrible suffering and pain that he was enduring. Despite surgery and chemotherapy, rough and stubborn Bogey could not beat this horrible battle. Humphrey Bogart passed away on January 14th, 1957, sadly leaving behind his young wife and 2 young sons. He had just turned 57 years old. Lauren Bacall was very candid later in life about her relationship with Bogey. There were many accounts of rockiness and even infidelity in their marriage, but Bacall chose to focus on the good, and it sounds like there was plenty of that. Humphrey Bogart was not set up well for life with the childhood he was given, lacking love, but he did the best he could in his relationships, and it sounds like he and Lauren Bacall really had a true and deep love for one another. I'm happy that he had that at the end of his life. Here are some other interesting facts I learned about Humphrey Bogart while doing my research. Bullet point number 1. Humphrey Bogart and Spencer Tracy became buds during the 1930 filming of Up the River. They loved to get drunk together, and Spencer Tracy was actually the one who came up with Humphrey's famous nickname, Bogey. Prior to this, his nickname was Hump, so thank you, Spencer Tracy. Spencer Tracy was also one of the only people permitted to see him at the end of his life. Bullet point number 2. Ingrid Bergman was taller than Humphrey Bogart. He was only 5'8", I think. So he had to wear 3 to 5-inch wooden blocks installed in his shoes during the filming of Casablanca to make up for their height difference. I saw a picture of these and they do not look comfortable. Bullet point number 3. The infamous Rat Pack name of Frank Sinatra and the gang was introduced by Lauren Bacall. The morning after an all-night booze fest at their house, Lauren saw the guys and said they look like a rat pack. They loved it and the name stuck. Frank Sinatra insisted that they no longer use the name after Humphrey Bogart's death, but of course everyone still did and still does. Bullet point number 4. Lauren Bacall and Frank Sinatra grew closer during Bogart's illness, leaning on each other for support. They began dating after Bogey's death and were even engaged for a short while. In conclusion, Humphrey Bogart was a child deprived of love who turned into a man who struggled to know how to love. He finally found what he was looking for, teaching us it's never too late to achieve happiness. Thank you, Humphrey Bogart, for showing us that, and for your unique and unforgettable characters. And thank you all for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review where you listen to your podcasts, and follow the show on Facebook and Instagram. Until next time, Goldies! For this episode, I used a book titled Humphrey Bogart, A Life from Beginning to End by the Hourly History series. I also used an article from the Netherland Institute, an article from Country Living magazine from August 13th, 2017 by Maria Carter titled Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall's romance began with a scandalous affair, HumphreyBogart.com, Biography.com, Britannica.com, and IMDB.